Hi everybody, Steven here. If you ever wondered what these VMs are, you see these mysterious VMs in your vSphere environment, what do they do? How do they get deployed? Should I mess with them? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about in this video, so you need to stick around. Also, I'll talk about what's new as of vSphere 8 Update 3, but we'll save that towards the end. See you in a bit. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. So in this video, I'm going to talk about these mysterious VMs called the vSphere Cluster Services VMs. We'll take a look at what they're for, and we'll take a look at also how do they get deployed and certain things you shouldn't really be doing with them as well. Also, I'll talk about what has changed, what's new as of vSphere 8 Update 3. So we'll take a look at that, but I'll cover that towards the end, so you want to stick around. And I always like to throw this out at this point. For those of you that subscribe to the channel, again, 10 thumbs up to you folks. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. For those of you that have not subscribed to the channel, please consider supporting the channel. It's totally free. Click that subscribe button. 75% of my viewers are not subscribed, so please consider supporting the channel. This way I can continue making these videos. Like I said, it's totally free. You click on that subscribe button. Other ways is liking videos, leaving comments down below, helps with YouTube analytics. And I also have super thanks enabled, but that's totally up to you. So why don't we get started? Let's jump into my demo. Okay, so we are in my lab environment right now. Let's just take a quick look. So here's my vCenter server. You'll see I'm running version 8.0 update 3. More importantly, look at my host. They are running 8.0, looks like update 1. Okay, so I'm not at the latest and greatest version. That's okay. Now, one of the things you might have noticed when we talked about these cluster service VMs, here I'm in a host and clusters view. I see some VMs over here. I got my host, got a cluster, with 3 hosts. Great. You don't see those weird looking VMs here. When I go into virtual machines and templates view, when I open up this folder VCLS, you'll see that there's 3 VMs there, VCLS and whatever UUID number, right? So these are cluster service VMs. Now, it's important you understand what they're used for. Now, you need to understand what vSphere HA is, and you need to understand what vSphere's DRS, the DRS cluster is. If you don't know those, you need to watch my videos on that, okay? So a HA cluster, vSphere HA cluster, if a host and a cluster should fail, all the VMs on that host are gone, okay? They're out right now. However, the surviving host in that cluster would detect that host failure and say, oh, that host had these VMs. Let's restart those VMs on the surviving host. That's what HA is, high availability, right? Now, HA, its primary concern is to start up VMs. Now, DRS's job is to, just a quick way of explaining it, watch my DRS video, is it balances the load across the hosts, right? So I want to make sure these VMs are all getting their resources. I don't have certain hosts being overloaded and other ones doing nothing. So it kind of balances the load across the host from a VM's perspective, okay? So everybody can get their resources. Real quick explanation, watch my DRS video for the full explanation, right? So now remember, vCenter server is a VM. So imagine this, your host fails. There's a whole bunch of VMs on that host. Those VMs fail too, right? vCenter is a VM on that host. Guess what? vCenter died, all right? So at this point, that host is down, all the VMs and vCenter are dead. DRS at this point is not going to function anymore because vCenter is gone, all right? However, HA will still function. Remember, vCenter, when you enable HA, vCenter installs this fault domain manager agent on each of the hosts. So what will happen is all the other hosts, survivors, will detect that host failure, and it will say, okay, we need to restart VMs. The problem here is vCenter is not around, so HA cannot ask DRS what's the best host to turn these VMs on. So HA is just going to power on VMs on whatever host it seems fit. So what could happen is you could end up with a host that's overloaded and other ones that aren't because of this failure, right? And then eventually when vSphere comes up and DRS kicks in, it can balance the load depending on your settings, right? The cluster service VMs here, the whole purpose behind this is to give you some form of DRS while vCenter is dead, right? So if vCenter should be one of the VMs that fails, HA can talk to like DRS and say, okay, which host should I power it on? It'll make kind of a decent decision on that. So that's what these cluster service VMs are. Now you'll notice that there's 3 of them here, right? General rule of thumb is don't mess with these, leave them alone, Okay, watch this. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go power off. Okay, these should be managed by the cluster services. Okay, notice the VM is now powered off. All right, if I right click, it won't let me delete from disk. Okay, so it won't let me do that. Okay, so the rule of thumb is not to mess with these things. So I'm just going to give this thing a few more seconds. Let's see what happens here. We'll give it a few seconds. Anyways, there we go. If you notice, it's powered back on. All right. So again, vCenter, the cluster services, is looking after that. Now, what's going on underneath the covers? Let's go into here. Let's go into administration. Let's go into vCenter server extensions. And in there's this thing called ESX Agent Manager. It's been around for over 10 years, if I remember correctly, right? A lot of people aren't even aware of it, right? It's a component that's part of vCenter. So it's an agent manager, all right, for ESX agents. And these agents can provide various services. One of them is that cluster service VM. Let me click on that. And then from here, if I go to summary, you'll see, okay, it just shows me the version, monitor, there's no events here. If I go to configure, you'll see there's an agency here, a VCLS, vSphere Cluster Service Agency, and it's on cluster 01. Okay, if I click on VMs, there you'll see some of those 3 VMs. All right, let's go back to here. Let's see what happens now. So EM is in charge of deploying and undeploying, I guess I'll say, these cluster service VMs. Let's go into here. Let's go into inventory. Let's create a new cluster. Let's go clusters view, data center, right click, new cluster, and I'm going to call this site v-cluster-02. All right. I'm going to enable DRS. I'm not going to enable HA. The reason why I'm not going to enable HA is because when I add a host to this cluster, you'll see it's going to install the HA agent, default domain manager. I don't want that getting in the way of what I'm trying to demo. So I'm going to leave that deselected. I'm going to remove that as well. I don't care about that. I'll go next and go finish. Great. I've just created a new cluster, site B cluster 02. Let's go back into EM. Let's go to administration, server extension. Let's go to EM agent manager. And you'll see there's cluster 01. Let's refresh. This might take a few minutes to update, right? Let's look at these agencies. What should happen is it should create an agency for cluster 02. There we go. There's an agency for cluster 02. So let's go back into here now. Let's get rid of that tab so I don't get confused here. Let's go back into inventory. And here's, I got a host 4 just sitting around. I'm just going to drag and drop host 4 into cluster 02. Whatever, I'll put all the resource pools there, and then that's it. So there's cluster 02. Now let's just wait and see. Don't worry about this stuff here. Let's wait and see kind of what happens here, right? Come on. Notice over here, deploy OVF template down at the bottom. Don't worry about these other things. I've been messing around. Deploy OVF template, right? So it deployed. If I go back to VMs here now, you'll see there's a VM now for that cluster, and it's on host 4. So the ESX agent manager deployed, deployed the agent for me, the VCLS agent. Okay. And it should power it on. There we go. Give it a few seconds and stuff. There we go. So it powered it on, right? So EM looked after that. It says this host has an agency, a VCLS agency, and I just added a host to that. I need to deploy this service VM. Now, I only got one host in that cluster. If I add a second one, it will deploy a second VCLS VM. If I deploy the third one, it will deploy a third VM. So again, once you have more than 3 hosts in the cluster, so let's say I put a 4th and 5th and whatever number of hosts in that cluster, you'll only have 3 of these VCLS VMs. That's it, okay? So, and generally you don't mess with these, okay? So again, if I go back to this cluster here, if I go to the virtual machines, you'll see I got some regular VMs here, and you'll see I got 3 VCLS VMs here. I know I only got 3 hosts, but if I have 4 or 5, you'd still see 3. Again, I can power it off, which I showed you. It powers back on. If I try to delete it from disk, it won't let me delete it from disk. Can't remember if I showed that or not. Let's go to power off. Yes. And then if I right click, again, it won't let me delete from disk. Okay. So it'll power that one back on. Now let's do this. I'm going to do something that you shouldn't do in production. Okay. You shouldn't mess with these. Let me go directly to one of the hosts, site b-esxi-01.eclass.local, and my dog's just walking back and forth. Here's nails clicking on the floor there. Go to VMs here. There's that cluster service VM. I'm going to right click. I'm going to power off. And I'll say yes. I'm doing this outside of vCenter. I'm going to right click and do this real fast. I'm going to say delete. And there we go. I just did something I shouldn't be doing, okay? So I deleted it. Let's go back into here. Again, you notice that that one's orphaned. It's gone now. So I did something outside of vCenter. Let's give it a few seconds here. And you see it's actually deploying another one. There we go. Deploy OVF. So EM's seen this, right? The ESX Agent Manager's seen, oh, this cluster only has 2 of them. It's supposed to have 3, and it automatically manages this for me, okay? Let's try something else while that's deploying. Let's go into here. Let's look at host 4. Host 4 has one of these VCLS VMs. Let's right-click and put host 4 in the maintenance mode. I've seen this work before. Oh, actually, sorry. Notice how I selected move powered on VMs, right? I don't have another host in that. Notice it's in enter maintenance mode, and it's kind of just going to sit there. There isn't another host in that cluster, right, to move that VCLS VM to. All right, so that would be a problem. So in a cluster, again, if you need to put a host in maintenance mode and there's a VCLS VM there, if you got DRS enabled, it can migrate it and all that kind of wonderful stuff. Right now, I'm kind of dead in the water. Let me show you something. Now, I can right-click on that and power it off, which I really shouldn't do. Let's go to the cluster. I'm going to select the cluster, go to Configure. Under Cluster Services, I'm going to go General, and then VCLS mode. Edit VCLS mode. System Managed or Retreat mode. System Managed, the default. Retreat mode basically says here, well, retreat mode should be used with extra caution because DRS will not function if DRS is enabled. So you're basically disabling DRS. And HA will not perform optimal placement. HA will still work though during host failures. Okay, so I'm going to say okay, the retreat mode. Now, when I go back to, notice there's a red mark on my cluster now. If I go back to VMs here and give it a few seconds, it should turn off this VCLS machine. This VCLS VM. Let's go to the summary tab while we're waiting for that to happen. Notice over here, the cluster services are disabled by retreat mode. DRS is not functioning and HA will not perform optimally. It will still perform, but it won't be optimal, right? Let's go back to here and I may just have to refresh things. Things might be a little bit slow. We'll give it a few more seconds here. But it should, I thought it was the right cluster. Yeah. There we go. Notice it powered it off. Okay, notice this host is now in maintenance mode. So that might be a situation where you need to go into retreat mode. Oh, whatever reason, I got to power off all these VMs, do whatever I got to do. This might be an example of, but for the most part, you're leaving these alone. Don't manage it. Now, let me show you this. Right now, I've got host 4 selected, and you see the VM is there. Okay, let's take the host out of the cluster. So let's drop it into the data center. So it's no longer part of that cluster, hence no longer part of that ESX agency, right? If I click on host 4 here, you'll still see the VCLS VM there. It's powered off though. Let's exit maintenance mode and see what happens. Maintenance mode, exit maintenance mode. And then you notice the VCLS VM is gone now. So EM looked after all that for me. He says, hey, you're part of this cluster. You need to have this agent or whatever. And it's not just for this. Other services could use it, antivirus, that type of stuff. But this is kind of an example of what's going on. All right. So that's kind of neat. I think I covered everything there. What's new? With update 3, you might have noticed something different. Okay. Let me pause recording and come right back. Okay, so we're back. Just had to take a little break there for a second. I also like to split up my recordings just in case, instead of making one big recording and all of a sudden it crashes, I got to start from scratch. It's always easier to recover if it's just a fragment or something. So right now I'm on my site A. My site A, if I look at my vCenter server, it's running 8.0 update 3. More importantly, if I look at each of my hosts, the hosts are running update 3 as well. So once your vCenter is running update 3 and your host is running update 3, what's going to happen is it will now automatically upgrade you to VCLS version 2. So the one I just talked about is referred to as VCLS or vSphere Cluster Services version 1.0. This is 2.0 now. What's the difference? The first thing right off the bat, if I go to my virtual machines and templates view, you see 2 of these VCLS VMs and not 3. That's okay. That's normal. Okay. Again, your hosts and your vCenter server in that cluster must be running update 3, okay, in order to see this. Now, great, okay, big deal, you know, so we're saving a little bit of resources. That's kind of nice. Same kind of thing, you know, if you power it off or power it on, you know, it's all managed by vCenter. The difference here, this is I'm not a Kubernetes guy. This is a pod or a pod that's running on your host. So actually, if we go back to, let's go back to my site B. Sorry about that. My site B here. Let's go back to site B and let's just check out something really quick. One of the things I didn't mention, and I probably should have, is I got a bunch of alarms going off there. That doesn't matter. If I go to configure, I already showed you the retreat mode, cluster services, data store. You can specify the data store where you want to store these. If I look at those VMs here, if I click on that, if I go to data store, you'll see that's on my vSAN data store. Look at these ones. These are actually smaller VMs, but if I click on them, if I go to data store, there's no data store. What the heck is going on here, right? How can you have a VM with no data store attached to it? Okay, so like I said, this is a container. On your ESXi host, there's a thing called the Infravisor. The Infravisor, I guess, is a new service now. I think that came out with update 2. Don't quote me on that. But anyways, and it looks after the life cycle of these cluster service VMs now. Okay. Now, like before, I could power it off. You know, if I right click, I go power off. Again, you should be doing this. I power off. Okay, great. And you should see it'll power it back on. Okay, just like before, right? The big difference between the two of them. Remember, EM deployed a VM. Remember, you know, I showed you that in the task when it said it's going to deploy an OVF. When I deleted it, it deployed an OVF. So, and that took a while because I have to dump it down from vCenter server, go across the network, and instantiate a VM, right? Again, this thing's still doing its thing here. Notice it just disappeared all of a sudden. It's just gone. That one I powered off. Let's see what happens here. Anyways, I'll just keep talking. We'll give it a few seconds, right? So if your host and your vCenter server aren't really local to each other, that portion of it dumping down that OVF down to the your host may fail, right? You may have some issues there, right? This is the embedded VCLS. So it's a container. It's already set up on the host. All we're doing is turning on a flag saying, turn that on. That's it. Okay? It's not pushing out a VM or anything like that. It actually runs inside memory. Now, again, this is taking a little bit longer in my lab environment. Let me just maybe just go over to here. Let's see what's... Anyways, we'll let that run for a bit. But I want to see what host this is running on. Let me click on my old hosting clusters. Let's click on host 1. So it has that one there. Okay, so it looks like it's on host 1. Okay, let's go investigate that. Let's see what happens here after the fact, right? So let's go to host 1. Let's minimize that. Let's go into host 1 here. And it's actually, remember I said there's no disk. Let me show you something here. Let's just increase the font size a bit there, folks. Change settings, appearance, and let's go to 14. Apply. Okay, so that's good enough. I'm going to run this command, vdf-h. Shows me the disk space and even the virtual disk space. Notice down here there's this RAM disk via CRX. Interesting. Okay, let me go into CD space. What's it? var/run CRX. Is that right? Yeah, there we go. There's a RAM disk for this container runtime environment, right? If I do an ls here, you'll actually see there's an infra folder. If I go into there, infra, if I go ls, you'll see that there's a VCLS 19C. Let's go back to vCenter here. VCLS 19C, you see it right there. Notice my other one's deployed now. I shouldn't say deployed, it was activated, right? Remember, I'm in a nested environment, right? So maybe a little bit slower. So great, I'll go into there, into that folder, CD VCLS, and look at this. Look at those files. Does that look like a virtual machine? This is RAM disk. So these things are containers running in RAM disk. Now, what's the command? I can actually look at this. There's an infra command line, CLI, get pods -A, I think it is for all. And you'll actually see there's the namespace, VCLS, and here's the name right here. Let's copy that. Let's look at this pod. And maybe I want to just do the pod name. So let's paste that in. -N for the namespace, and it's VCLS. Let's see if I got that right. So it's showing me, again, this is a pod that's running. Again, it's ID and a few other bit of information here. And the image is based on this VCLS pod container runtime. I thought that was executable, container runtime for ESXi, for what I understand. So that's kind of neat, okay? So these things are much more efficient than the previous version. So this is what they call the embedded VCLS. Let's go into host 1 now. Let's go into host 1. Now I'm going to do what I did before. Let's go into site A-ESXi-01-vClass. Now, local don't be doing this in production, folks. This is a bad thing to do. Again, these cluster service VMs, you should leave them alone. Like in my demo there, when I was trying to put that host in maintenance mode because of my situation, it couldn't migrate that, and I went into retreat mode. That's the only thing that you really should need to do, and that would probably be pretty. I think it's pretty rare, but again, it's there just in case you have to. Let's right-click on this. I'm going to say power off. Yep. And I'm going to delete that right from disk. The reason why I'm connecting directly to the host is because vCenter won't let me delete it. That's why I'm bypassing it. Don't do this in production. So there we go. I've just deleted it. You see it's gone over here. And we probably just got to wait a little bit, and we should see it spin up another. I shouldn't say spin up, okay? Remember when I did this in the previous one, you've seen it deploying the OVF. You won't see that happening. All of a sudden, it'll just appear like this. Now, it might take there you go. It just appeared. We didn't see anything down in the recent task on deploying. So much more efficient. It's more an embedded container or pod that's on your host, and we just tell it, turn it on, and that's it. All right? So that's pretty much it for these cluster service VMs. I don't know if there's anything else we need to cover on that. I think that's pretty straightforward. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider supporting the channel by subscribing, like, and leave comments down below. All right? We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.